The Colour Out of Space is not a good movie, and it's an even worse adaptation. And Nicolas Cage is really fucking bad in it. So, this is my copy of The Colour Out of Space. It's obviously mixed in with other short stories. I think in this edition, The Colour Out of Space maxes out at 31 pages. If you're trying to do Lovecraft, you have to do certain things. It's not about directly adapting with exact characters, exact locations. It's about a feeling. It's about reason, weirdly enough. In Lovecraft's sort of approach to things, it's all very logical, strangely enough, even though a lot of his stuff is suggestion and sort of high concept fantasy stuff like magic and beasts from like the Eternal. It all kind of logically follows on from each other. This movie just falls into the camp of let's have mad shit happen sometimes. But anyway, let's get into it. So at the beginning, you've got the teenage girl character, Lavinia Gardner. Lavinia is a character from the Dunwich Horror. A little nod to another Lovecraft story. Okay, so she's on the edge of this reservoir or this lake, whatever, practicing witchcraft. To which your brain immediately thinks, okay, this is Lovecraftian. The witchcraft is going to pay off somehow. It's like she's going to do something witchy, and it's going to pay off. Spoilers, it doesn't. There's literally no point to it. And she's approached by Ward, the surveyor. The surveyor character in this movie is a completely useless, passive bystander who experiences the colour and what it does to people and doesn't affect anything. And to be fair, in the actual story itself, the surveyor character doesn't really do much either, but he does interview Amy Pierce, and he's the one that tries to get the information about like what the strange days were, what the blasted heath is. He has all of this stuff, all of this information ready to go. This character just experiences it as the movie plays out. The location that they're shooting in is really, really nice. It results in some genuinely impressive photography. You get a little blast of the Colin Stetson soundtrack, and Colin Stetson, I'm a fan of his music when it's just him with his big old saxophone, which is kind of why I liked the Hereditary score so much. This score feels like his saxophone's kind of buried in amongst other things. It sort of feels like it gets lost a little bit, which is a shame, because I was prepared to like the score above all else, but I didn't even end up liking the score all that much. It started to feel quite generic by a point. Right away you realise just how distracting Nicolas Cage is. There's a lot of just like familial banter right out the gate to establish that they are a family that cares about each other, kinda. It's meant to just give you an idea of what their dynamic is. It feels completely contrived and unnatural. It's not unnatural in a good, compelling, creepy way. It's unnatural in a cringy way, where you can tell it's just a bunch of bad actors in a space together being bad. And Nicolas Cage is the ringleader of the bad actors. He's hamming it up and doing voices for no reason. I guess trying to play like a playful dad or whatever, but it just comes across as Nicolas Cage doing bad voices. And it just lifts you clean out of the movie instantly. Nicolas Cage is talking to the wife character, and they're talking about being in love and accomplishing their goals. You don't know these people, you don't care about these people, and it doesn't feel natural in any way whatsoever. And at that point, it started to strike me. Ward, the surveyor character, did not really seem to suggest to Lavinia when he met her that the plan was to flood this entire area and destroy the Gardner farm. There's no tension resulting from that. There's no like build up of like they understand that they're on borrowed time. There's nothing about that. I don't know whatever the hell the Joker's name is that made this movie. I can't remember what the guy's name is. I'll put it up right now along with a picture of his face back here. This guy clearly, as much as he says he's a fan of Lovecraft, and he said that he used to read the stories when he was wee, clearly he hadn't read The Colour Out of Space recently, before he like wrote the script for the movie or whatever, because in the story it is literally outlined that Ward, the surveyor character, the narrator, he goes after all of these events happen and he talks to the locals, and he was speaking to Amy Pierce, who is the only person who lives near the Blasted Heath, and he's the one that conveys everything that happens. And they refer to this period of the Gardener's farm falling into this state of decay as the Strange Days, because it took place over a year or more. It's crazy to me that this surveyor character in the movie just sort of swans in, and they're saying that he's testing the water table and whatnot and preparing the area to be flooded with a dam, and yet the Gardner family seem completely unaware of it. And the fact that in order for that plan to go ahead, their farm would have to be destroyed and they would have to relocate, but they're talking the whole time as if that isn't going to happen, which is absolutely baffling to me. Is like one of the cruxes of the story is like you can't just pretend that plot doesn't exist. If there's a surveyor there to test the water table and to try and gauge whether or not this place would be appropriate for a gigantic dam and a massive reservoir which would swallow up a majority of the countryside, which was still at that time being used. Like, how can you just pretend the other characters that would be affected by this massive flooding just don't know or don't care? They're just going about their business. Clearly they didn't think about this at all. They wanted the surveyor character in there to be like the audience surrogate to have things happen to him, but they didn't think about what that means for the story, because in the story, the actual story, the fucking surveyor comes 50 years after the Strange Days. He comes a long time after the Strange Days. And the Blasted Heath has been spreading ever so slightly the whole time. And they want it to be swallowed up by water. They don't have a problem with that. Amy Pierce is happy to have it happen because he knows what happened there. None of this is in any way established in the movie. But besides that night, after you've had the establishing stuff with the family and you've gotten to know them a little bit more, the meteor strikes down, it hits, and that's it. The colours here. And they did okay with the colour. I like the whole magenta colour scheme and the sort of slight subtle use of like sort of iridescent shimmer in it. The shimmery parts actually reminded me a lot of how they portrayed Area X in the movie version of Annihilation, which I thought was as good as it was going to get for a visual representation of something that, again, can't really be represented in a visual medium. So the next morning, out of nowhere comes this fucking mayor character, and I know this is nitpicky and it has nothing to do with the book, and the whole point is me trying to compare these two things and try to make it make sense. I don't care. I hate this mayor character that they've got in this one scene for no reason other than to have a Jaws mayor. She never shows up again. There's no point to the character, and it's just more Cage banter to have. It's just an excuse for to have Cage act weird again, to have another character play off of. There's another moment where you get to see the iridescence in the colour affecting the water supply. The girl is like washing dishes or something, and you can see this glistening in the water, and it looks really, really nice. A good touch. I like that. Again, suggesting at stuff rather than just out and out telling you, but then they just tell you because a big pink flash happens behind her. That kind of thing just sort of really cuts through all of the tension, and that scene comes like basically directly after the mother character, the night after the meteorite has landed, has already lost her fucking mind. She like zones out to the point where she cuts her own fingers off with a big knife. Cage, when he comes back from the hospital, is absolutely resolute in his belief that nothing strange is happening whatsoever, and the children are trying to explain that to him, that something is going wrong, and for some reason he's just having none of it. Again, the colours just affecting their brains. It's like the Force. It's like Palpatine clouding everyone's mind with the Force. Like, that's why everyone was too dumb to realise that it was definitely him doing everything. It's fine, he was clouding their minds. The colour out of space is clouding Nicolas Cage's mind. You can't talk reason to Nicolas Cage right now. He's having one of his moments. Having it happen literally like a day and a half later, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So I've already explained that I don't like Nicolas Cage's performance in this movie. I think it really undermines a lot of the potential tension that they could have eked out. He is usually the focal point of a lot of the familial tension scenes, and familial tension is amazing in horror. Just look at things like Kill List and Hereditary. Hereditary is probably the most recent example I can think of something that's just terrifying at times because of how the family interacts with each other. That's great. Look at this movie. It stinks, because there's a moment in this movie where Nicolas Cage goes for a shower, and this is the evening after the mother character has come back from the hospital after cutting her own fingers off. So we're talking like 2 days since the meteorite landed, and inexplicably there's a jellyfish thing in the shower, and Nicolas Cage picks it up while he's showering, and it sort of stings his hand, and he freaks out, and then he comes out of the shower and immediately has an argument with the wife. The wife wants the Wi-Fi back on so she can work. She just cut her fingers off, and she's wearing an absolutely fucking ludicrous cartoon bandage on her hand. Her fingers got cut off. These fingers, these two fingies, got cut off, and she's wearing a fucking massive cartoon boxing glove of bandages all the way down to her wrist. It's laughable. I don't get it. I don't get why this sort of shit is in this movie. It's so distracting. And then they have this argument, and the kid's there. The little boy is there, and he's talking about how the dog is with Grandpa now, and like they're saying Grandpa's dead, but he's talking about, the kid's talking about it as if the dog's just went away somewhere, and the mother character's screaming about Wi-Fi, and Nicolas Cage is shouting about something else, maybe the smell again. I can't exactly remember. I think it is the smell. So they have this big shouting match, and it takes all of 10 seconds. It's like 10 seconds of explosive, cartoonish yelling about shit that doesn't matter at all, and then that's it. The fight is over, and that it's meant to, I'm assuming, meant to make you feel all tense and weird, but it doesn't, because they're all like hilariously bad actors. The next day, Nicolas Cage is picking the fruit. This is 3 days, like 2.5 to 3 days after the meteorite has landed in the movie, and inexplicably the fruit is massive and ready for harvest. And then he comes in and he's like eating a peach, and I couldn't help but think about him eating peaches for hours. Then the wife comes in, she's upset about the Wi-Fi again, and she's like apparently holding video calls with, I'm assuming, investors. It seems like she does something with money. And she's still got this cartoonish bandage on her hand, and she's just shouting about Wi-Fi. And Cage takes a big bite out of the peach, and it tastes bad, and he's clearly upset about it. So he has one of his signature Nicolas Cage freak-out moments, and I'm assuming that it's meant to be either jarring or funny. I found it neither. It's just embarrassing, and then it made me angry because I remembered that it's meant to be an adaptation of The Colour Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft. And he dunks all of this fruit in the bin, one after the other, and we've got to watch every one of them go in the bin, with Nicolas Cage saying slam dunk. It's around this time that the coolest thing in the movie happens. So the small son and the large son go into the barn, and they see the alpacas have merged into a giant Cronenberg mess of flesh and bone, and just shouts. The thing's just full of shouts, and it's hollering, and they're hollering, and they run out of the barn because the Colour Out of Space is chasing them. So the Colour Out of Space has gone from being almost like a haunting, like a ghostly entity, to what it is in the actual book, which is a sort of ecological disaster, sort of alien infiltrator, then segued insanely into literally being the Predator, because the Colour Out of Space chases these boys out of the barn, and you see it from the Colour Out of Space's point of view, and the Colour Out of Space has predator vision for no reason, and I hate it so fucking much. Why does it have predator vision? So all this light comes out of the alpaca mass. The mother character runs out when she hears all the commotion, and she sees the two boys running from the Colour Out of Space. So she runs at the Colour Out of Space, and even though the two boys were managing to run away from the Colour Out of Space pretty handily, they were getting away. The mother character grabs the little boy and stops him from running, and the large son gets away, but the mother and the child get attacked by the Colour Out of Space. I hate shite like this so much. I already hated it because they had managed to turn what was a masterfully subtle and insidious creeping death into a fucking cartoon alien villain like the Predator. And then something like this had to happen, which is one of those tropes from movies that I don't think I'm alone in hating this. Why, when they were running away just fine, did the mother character have to grab and hug her small son, letting the large son just run away, and that's not a problem, and he got away and he's fine? but she had to grab the little boy. And the only reason she grabs the little boy is because they needed the next scene to happen, which is the mother and son, after having been attacked by the colour out of space, have now been fused into a horrible, screeching Cronenberg mass, just like the alpacas. You get over the initial shock of how this thing looks, and then you get back to being bored and annoyed. Obviously, the logical thing for Nicolas Cage to do is to go out into the car to go and get help. But the car won't start, of course, because, again, the colour out of space just randomly affects technology, like when it's convenient for the story. So he has just an absolute maddie in the car. He has one of his signature Nicolas Cage freakouts. Nicolas Cage having a big shout in a car isn't funny or impressive as a piece of acting. It's nothing. So then they're all in the attic and they're deliberating what to do. So he just decides what he's going to do is he's going to go out and shoot the alpaca monstrosity. And he does. He gets a big shotgun, he goes and shoots it. And he just takes a fucking maddie while he's doing it. And it's embarrassing and distracting. But the alpaca thing looks cool. And it getting shot to fuck is genuinely a little bit upsetting. If Nicolas Cage wasn't in that role, that might have actually been a really cool scene. Like, you know, maybe. But then he comes back up to the attic and they're all there. Yeah, so it's heavily implied that Nicolas Cage is going to shoot his wife and son with a shotgun. The girl character, who has played absolutely no part in this story at all, it feels, since the opening scene, really. She gives maybe one of the worst line readings I've ever heard. Maybe the worst line reading since Part Time from Crystal Skull. It might be. She says this.
Like you handled the alpacas.
And she's got that face on her. It sucked shit, and I wish it hadn't happened, and I wish this whole movie hadn't happened. So if you're even a casual fan of H.P. Lovecraft, you'll know that a lot of his stuff contains things like forbidden ritual and occult practices, witchcraft, you know, horrors from beyond and undescribable nightmares and non-Euclidean geometry and gambrel roofs. But you can't just like tip your hat to that and then not do anything with it, because like I said earlier on, you think for sure, because she's doing witchcraft at the beginning of the movie, that Lavinia is going to do something with the witchcraft, that she's going to perform a ritual and it's somehow going to protect her, or maybe somehow protect the family, because they've already deviated so much from the actual story itself. So at that point I was like, you know what, at least if they pay the witchcraft stuff off, I wouldn't care, because, you know, fuck it, they've already ruined it, they might as well make their own thing. So yeah, sure, she maybe does some shit with witchcraft and she fends off the colour out of space somehow. So she goes into her room and she does a ritual, and she cuts symbols into her skin. And you think, oh shit, like this actually might be leading to something, because she's cutting symbols into her skin. She must know something, and she's reading a Necronomicon and everything. Again, it's like you're piling on these references and then completely fucking failing to pay them off. Because the whole point of Lovecraft stories, and I can't stress this enough, is like witchcraft and occult practices and stuff like that, they're all real in his lore, in his world that he writes in. You can't make these references to this stuff just to have the references there if you're trying to make a Lovecraft story. You have to acknowledge the fact that if someone's practicing witchcraft out of the Necronomicon, then something would need to happen. Because in H.P. Lovecraft's stories, the intellectual characters that dismiss things like witchcraft and the Necronomicon and the power of the beyond and whatnot as like superstition and, you know, just myth and legend from backwards hill folk and stuff like that, they are always proven wrong. It's not hard. it's not complicated. His stuff was never complicated. That's what makes it so great. His stories are all so basic but told in such ridiculously elaborate ways, using such elaborate prose that he could conjure images that no one else could. And it's just yet another point in this movie where I had to just stop and think, are they going to fuck this up? And they did. So Lavinia does all this, and then immediately she just goes to the large son, like, let's just leave. So she did all that just to be like, okay, let's bail. But the large son all of a sudden cares a lot about the dog, which we haven't seen in quite some time, and he thinks the dog's in the well. So, of course, again, another trope that I hate from these shitty movies. A character has to suddenly decide to do something that is completely illogical, and no one tries to stop him, and he just dies needlessly. And I get it, the colour out of space is clouding his judgment through manipulation of the midichlorians, blah 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 blah. Yeah, I get it. The colour out of space made him do it. Earlier on in the movie, he gets these goggles. He's got goggles, like welder's goggles, it looks like, and they point it out, so it's like, okay, it's going to come into play. They actually take the time to introduce you to these fucking goggles. So again, you think maybe at some point he's going to put on these goggles and he's going to see the colour out of space and be able to comprehend it a little bit more or something. It's not in the fucking book, so it didn't matter to me whether or not it was dumb, just as long as it paid off. Here's how it pays off. He gets in the well. He's climbing down the well to get a dog that's clearly either dead and drowned at the bottom of a well, or it's not a dog and it's the colour out of space and it's going to get you. But he climbs into the well anyway, and he's like part of the way down the well, and the colour out of space comes from, and I was like, mate, I told you it was going to be the colour out of space. But he's like that, he's looking at the colour out of space coming to get him, and he goes, I'll put the goggles on. So he puts the goggles on, and then the colour out of space gets him, and it was completely pointless. So they took the time to show us that he had these goggles earlier on in the movie, and then the big payoff is he puts the goggles on literally about 4 seconds before he dies, and they do nothing. The goggles do nothing.
My eyes, the goggles do nothing.
So it's around this time in the story that the sheriff and the surveyor are going around trying to figure out what's going on. The surveyor's there for reasons. In the book, it's like a whole party of guys that come basically after Amy Pierce has witnessed his friend collapse into a pile of nothing, and sort of watched the rest of the family, or at least understood that the rest of the family have sort of shared the same fate, and the farm is basically gone. It's been consumed by something, and it needs to be dealt with by more learned men than Amy Pierce. So people come and they witness the colour out of space basically leaving, and there's a sort of there's a tacit understanding that something bad happened here, and that none of them fully understand what happened. So the equivalent of this in the movie is a sheriff and a water table surveyor are there. So they go and they find the gardeners up in the attic, and they find the monstrosity in the attic. And it looks like the monstrosity is going to kill Lavinia, because Lavinia's really the only sane member of the family left, it seems. So it's on top of her and it's doing stuff and it looks cool. Again, it's great, like, I don't know, animatronic thing, like prosthetics, I don't know, it looks cool. The sheriff and the surveyor are there, and the sheriff's got a big gun, but for some reason, because again the sheriff and the surveyor are there for absolutely no reason other than the story to happen to them, Nicolas Cage, even though he's crazy at this point, just comes in and shoots the beast. Couldn't you just have the sheriff shoot it so he doesn't seem completely and utterly pointless? Yeah, he shoots the mother, and he shoots the son, and he's just like, yeah, it's not them, I don't care. I've got my family, they're downstairs. I'm getting turned downstairs. And then he just fucks off and he sort of leaves with Lavinia there, even though like about 5 minutes before that, he was the one that locked her in the attic. They're trying to take Lavinia away, and Nicolas Cage comes out and he sees the colour, but Ward and Lavinia are like standing kind of in front of him, and he raises the shotgun as if he's going to shoot the colour out of space. So the sheriff actually does something, he shoots Nicolas Cage right in his fucking heart, and Lavinia for some reason is upset about this, even though she spent the whole movie hating Nicolas Cage and hating the farm and not wanting to be there anymore, and being in the process of leaving when she gets locked in the attic. All of a sudden she wants to stay with Nicolas Cage because Nicolas Cage has been shot in the fucking heart. So the sheriff and Ward go like, oh fuck this noise, let's go to see the old crazy Chong. Let's go and see Chong. He'll know what to do. So they go and see Chong, and his CCTV cameras and his tape player and all that, they're all working. All the other electronics in the car even don't work, but his stuff works. And over the tape player, they're actually playing an excerpt from the book, a direct reading from the book of Nahum Gardner, who is Nicolas Cage. Nahum Gardner in the book says this stuff about the colour out of space, and it's playing the whole time, apparently, the Ezra that Chong is sitting there, and then Chong's dead, and the colour got him, and then he kind of just collapses in on himself. And then, inexplicably, the colour out of space can make the trees move, and the tree moves, and it kills the sheriff. And I got so fucking angry. It's just chasing people around like it's fucking Jason or the Predator, and then all of a sudden it's using the trees to just straight up murder people, not just sway ominously like they do in the fucking book. So the sheriff just dies like an idiot, and Ward, the surveyor, just fucking runs right back to Lavinia as if he can change anything. He's been completely ineffective up until this point. Yeah, so you see a vision of this planet or whatever, this other realm where the colour comes from, and I thought it looked kind of cool. Looked like a Tool video. And reality's warping, and there's like trails being left by things, and it looks kind of cool, but again, Nicolas Cage is chasing them around like a fucking monster mash, and it's pointless and dumb, and I hate it. And then he locks himself in the basement, Ward locks himself in the basement to stop from getting monster mashed by Nicolas Cage. And then the whole place just blows up. And what's left is the blasted heath. It's this colourless, brittle, dusty wasteland that's been left in the wake of the colour. And then it just sort of immediately cuts to the reservoir being formed, the dam being built and the reservoir there. And Ward is just standing smoking on it, and he quotes stuff from the books directly, like he's glad that the water had buried the blasted heath and hidden the strange days. Strange days again being like maybe 6 days total, as opposed to a year plus in the book. Do you really think people would refer to anything that only took about 6 days as strange days, the strange days, like it's some piece of like huge monolithic folklore? Do you really think they'd be like, oh yeah, the strange days, remember that like half a week that we spent doing that? Strange days, man. That's how this terrible movie ends. It completely flubbed any honest attempt, I'd say, at capturing the tone and the gravitas of the original story, and it failed at being its own version of a sort of even vaguely eerie but kind of campy horror movie. I understand I'm biased. I understand to a point that this might not come across as a particularly level and fair response to a movie that I imagine a lot of people would probably enjoy, especially if they are big fans of Nicolas Cage and his shtick, which I think has run its course at this point. I do think that there is something to be said for mishandling and misunderstanding of source material. Maybe try to at least go down the route of something that might appropriate it a little bit better, like try to cultivate the same sort of atmosphere that H.P. Lovecraft was so good at. And I'm not saying I could do it. I don't think I could do it. I think it's a very, very dab hand it would take to do it. All I know is that if you can't do it, and maybe you didn't read the story as often as you maybe should have, then maybe don't be so gung-ho about adapting his stuff, that's all. And apparently he's making more. Apparently he's going to make multiple H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, and I just don't want that. I can't... So, that's my unpleasant big moan about The Colour Out of Space. And... Nicolas Cage, please retire. We've had enough. This could have actually been okay. He definitely hurt it.